He started from the very back, with a broken car and zero expectations. Lewis Hamilton, the 7-time world champion, was written off before the race even began at Spa-Francorchamps. But what followed shocked the entire paddock. In one of the most calculated and relentless drives of his career, Hamilton carved through the field and left even Ferrari speechless. This wasn't just a comeback, it was a statement, a reminder that greatness doesn't fade quietly. If you think Hamilton is past his prime, think again. This drive wasn't just about salvaging points, it was a message. And now, everyone's paying attention. By the time the checkered flag dropped, Hamilton had executed more clean overtakes than any other driver on the grid. He climbed from last to 7th, earning the fan vote for driver of the day and more. Importantly, he left Ferrari stunned into silence. But this wasn't just a comeback. This was a message loud enough to echo through the paddock, ripple through Maranello, and maybe, just maybe, change everything. Let's go back to where it started, and it wasn't pretty. Qualifying day at Spa, a track known for unpredictability, raw speed, and moments of greatness. But this time, it delivered one of the worst Saturdays of Hamilton's career in a Ferrari. He was eliminated in Q1, a humiliating result for a driver of his caliber. But the true failure wasn't his lap time, it was what was happening underneath. The car. Ferrari had installed an untested suspension floor interaction component. Engineers believed it would enhance cornering response. Hamilton, after Friday's practice, disagreed strongly. He said the car felt unpredictable, with snap oversteer, inconsistent throttle response, and zero mid-corner grip. His feedback was ignored. Ferrari, a team that once dominated with surgical precision, was now making calls without proper data correlation. They were tuning the car based on simulations, not driver feel. For Hamilton, that disconnect was the ultimate insult. The result? A forced pit lane start, last on the grid, in a car that had, quite literally, fought him all weekend. For most, that would have been the end of the story. But Lewis Hamilton, he was just getting started. What followed was a dramatic, overnight overhaul. Ferrari mechanics removed the problematic part. They softened the rear damping, adjusted the ride height, remapped the aero package, anything to regain some form of drivability. And it worked, sort of. The car wasn't suddenly perfect, but for the first time all weekend, Hamilton had something he could trust. He could push, he could fight, and when the lights went out on race day, he did exactly that. From the first lap, Hamilton launched what race analysts would later call a calculated midfield assault. It wasn't desperation, it wasn't chaos, it was precise, composed, and merciless. By lap 5, Hamilton had already cleared 5 cars. He wasn't aggressive in the reckless sense, he was methodical. At Eau Rouge, he carried confidence. On the Kemmel Straight, he positioned himself perfectly lap after lap. Into Blanchimont, he kept speed where others lifted. It was as if every move had been visualized in advance. And something strange happened on the Ferrari pit wall. It went quiet. Normally, Ferrari is a flurry of radio chatter adjustments, split times, aggressive strategies. But during this race, the engineers barely spoke. Why? Because they weren't leading Hamilton. They were watching him. As he cut through the midfield, Carlos Sainz tangled with penalties. Lance Stroll misjudged his braking. Yuki Tsunoda made desperate blocks. But Hamilton, he kept climbing. He reached P7, and Ferrari still didn't know how to react. No celebration, no radio cheer, just stunned silence. Behind that silence was a realization. Hamilton had done what the car and the team had almost made impossible. He had taken a wrecked weekend and turned it into a statement. One that said, "Imagine what I could have done if you had just listened to me on Friday." Post-race interviews were polite, professional, but Hamilton's words were carefully chosen. He thanked the team for the changes, but there was subtext, a cool edge beneath the gratitude. This drive wasn't about joy, it was about proving a point. What followed after the race was more important than any points scored. Internally, Ferrari's technical department began facing hard questions. Why did it take a qualifying collapse to trust Hamilton's feedback? Why were simulations prioritized over a 7-time champion's instincts? The race wasn't just a wake-up call, it was a mirror. and the image staring back wasn't flattering. In private conversations across the paddock, Ferrari's engineering minds began asking themselves a question they should have asked far earlier. Who's really steering this ship? For years, data models, wind tunnel readings, and simulations have shaped their decisions. But Lewis Hamilton, a man with more race wins than some engineers have years in the sport, was reminding them, lap by lap, that instinct and experience matter just as much as numbers on a screen. As Sky Sports reported, Hamilton himself reflected on that race at Spa 2025, comparing it to his earliest days in karting. Back then, there were no engineers and headsets, no complex strategies, just raw skill, intuition, and the will to fight through the pack. Every overtake had to be earned, and at Spa, he showed the world that same fire still burns. But let's be clear, this wasn't nostalgia. This was a rediscovery of danger. Because when Hamilton is given a car that responds even imperfectly, he becomes something far greater than just a contender. He becomes unrelenting. The field saw it. Fans across the globe saw it. Social media platforms lit up as footage of his overtakes, defensive moves, and inch-perfect lines went viral. He didn't win the race, but he won the moment, and that's why the fans voted him driver of the day. It was never about a trophy. It was about a message. I'm still here, and I'm not done. And now, the spotlight turns to Maranello because they can't ignore the question any longer. What happens when Ferrari finally builds the car around Lewis Hamilton? Instead of asking him to adapt to whatever flawed machine they put on track, if Spa has anything to go by, the results would be terrifying, not just for rivals like Red Bull, Mercedes, or McLaren, but for anyone betting against him. Because once Hamilton is no longer driving against the car, but with it he'll stop being a threat and start being the benchmark again. But Ferrari stands at a crossroads. One path continues the cycle, simulation-driven choices, cautious strategy, and ignoring real-time driver feedback. The other path is riskier, but potentially revolutionary, letting the man with 7 world titles lead from the cockpit, not just as a driver, but as the heart of the team. The next few races won't just define Hamilton's 2025 season. They'll define whether Ferrari has learned from the ghosts of the past, or if it will continue to silence its own greatness. Because in the end, Spa wasn't about 7th place. It was about power reclaimed. It was about a champion refusing to fade into the background. It was a living masterclass on what happens when raw experience, razor-sharp instinct, and pure intent collide. Hamilton didn't just race that day, he sent a declaration, one that the paddock, the fans, and especially Ferrari can no longer ignore. Ferrari didn't guide him. They watched him. The world watched him. And what they saw wasn't just a comeback. It was a declaration. Lewis Hamilton isn't fading away. He isn't settling for symbolic victories or graceful exits. He's still hungry, still sharp, still lethal. And if Ferrari can stop getting in his way, if they can finally give him the car he's asking for, what happened at Spa might just be the beginning of something truly unforgettable. He started last and finished with a legacy-defining statement. If this was just the beginning, the season may never be the same. Like, share, and subscribe for more epic comebacks and behind-the-scenes stories from the world of Formula One. Thanks for watching.